Guess what? It's that time. It's time for the top 10 comics of the week. Hey comic book fans, welcome back to Comic Book Corner 2.0, and fans, you're back with me, Mike Spider Slayer, getting ready to bring you my top 10 comics of the week, and this list is for January 9th, 2019, and the list is based off of my show, the top 10 most anticipated comics of the week, that premieres every Sunday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you get to see where those books actually rank on this particular list. Now, I want to thank you guys in advance for watching this. If you watch it on premiere, and if you watch it after the fact, I thank you just as much. I really appreciate you guys chatting it up in the chat or in the comments below. It makes for interesting conversations, and I appreciate if you guys haven't already, subscribe to the channel and like this video. Alright, so without further ado guys, let's not waste any more time and let's get started with this week's countdown. Alright, so coming in at number 10, in the book that I was quite disappointed with, and honestly, after reading this issue, I might not continue it because it's just might be just too much for me and not my style of writing, and it goes to actually Die issue 2. Now this was on my most anticipated list at number 6, so this dropped dramatically and it could be off my list going forward. Now Die makes for an interesting concept of a series, as kids were kidnapped, well, not kidnapped, but they disappeared and came back 2 years later, and now they got thrusted back into this Dungeon and Dragon type of world. And again, it makes for an interesting concept, but the storytelling is just too overwhelming for me. You get a list of characters, right, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 characters, and you got to briefly know them as kids. They get thrusted into the world, and now what happens is they're in this world, and they're trying to recover their friend, or their friend wound up calling them back. And in this issue now, they're struggling to get back into the actual Earth, and their old friend doesn't want to send them back because he's the Grandmaster. He's been stuck there for 30 years. He's kind of twisted and whatnot. And that part of the premise of the story is kind of cool, but getting to know all the characters, their types of abilities, the world that they're in, the lands that they have to travel through, the creatures that they must battle, it's just overwhelming. And the artwork, as beautiful as it is, it just doesn't go with the storytelling here. I feel like you need, you know, very detailed art, and to get to know these people and the story to tell, you need to see a little bit more action, a little bit more detailed, not so much like painted style of artwork, and it just doesn't fit my storytelling, you know. As much as a great concept as it is, I thought this story would go into a little bit of a different direction when it comes to when these kids disappeared. I didn't think they would go off into a whole other realm and they would stay there and things like that. I thought it would dive deeper into these characters' history and whatnot. So, yeah, so Die issue 1, definitely not my cup of tea. I like the concept of the story, I like the artwork, but it's just not for me. I don't think I'll be continuing it going forward. Alright, so moving on to number 9. And number 9 this week goes to Batman, issue 62. Batman's just been weird for me ever since Selina Kyle left the book, and I've said this many times before, and that's why it's been lower on the countdown for me on most anticipated and for the results. I think it was number 10 originally on my most anticipated list, and it felt, you know, it got one spot higher, but only because Die is not really my cup of tea. Now, when it comes to Batman, I just feel like the storytelling is at a stall, okay? In this issue, we had the threat of Pig, Professor Pig, and Batman is captured here, okay? And we get to see all these distorted images and colors and everything else, and Batman can't hear, and he doesn't know where he's at, and he's trying to reassess the exact situation and whatnot. And even though it makes for an interesting story and a different type of storytelling, this is the way Tom King has been writing his issues, like with tons of poetry and just different types of, like, I don't know, Shakespeare type of stuff, like poetry and all that kinds of weird things. And it just, I don't know, it just hasn't been my type of Batman. I feel like Detective Comics Batman has been the book for me when it comes to the Batman story. And what made this for an interesting story by the time you got to the end of it, though, was that Professor Pig was Damian. And Damian was wearing the mask the entire time. And you're like, what? And so is this a dream? Is this real? Like, you know, what happened here? You know, and I was like, this is just odd. So, yeah. It was kind of different. You know, it made for an interesting book, but at the end of the day, it's just, I don't know, I just feel like it's a stall for Batman. So, obviously, I continue to read Batman. I always will read Batman, but I just not enjoying Tom King's run at this particular point in time. Alright, so moving on to my number 8, and my number 8 book this week went to Web of Venom Unleashed, issue 1. Now, I had some high expectations for this book as well. This was number 2 on my most anticipated book, so this is almost like at the opposite end of the spectrum here. Ryan Stegman was the actual writer of this book, and we get different artists on this book as well, which the artwork was pretty interesting. I liked it. It was fine. I thought these guys, if they would take over a Venom series, it could be a lot of fun. You know, it could look very similar to what we've seen Ryan Stegman do. So the tone of the artwork was there. But when it came to the story, obviously the symbiote is more like a dog now, and it acts on the impulses of Eddie Brock. And we get to see that the dog is going after these people, or whatever the case may be, and they're all infected with these worms, and the Venom dog extracts the worms from their brains, and it's kind of weird. But when the Venom dog, I guess if that's what you want to call it, or the symbiote host, goes back to Eddie, we find out that Eddie realizes that Carnage is in town. That he realizes that the Carnage is responsible for this whole situation. And then you kind of understand the story, where you see the backstory of how Carnage actually infected all of these people. And so that was quite interesting too, and it gave the story a perspective, and we get to see obviously Carnage's mission here to obviously try to capture all the people that had symbiote hosts, so he can kind of awaken Knoll or whatnot. So it was okay. I mean, it wasn't what I expected, again, you know, from a book, but it was all right. I'm just looking forward to the regular Venom series at this point in time. So yeah, so definitely lower on my list as well. All right, so moving on. We're going to go on to my number 7 pick of the week. And my 7 pick of the week goes to none other than the Black Order. This is issue 3. I thought this book was good, but on my most anticipated list, I think it fell in number 9. So it was improved. The one thing, though, that I wanted from this series was I wanted more Nova. And I was kind of felt like I was a little shafted here, because I thought I was going to get some Nova action in this book. And we don't really see Nova except for maybe 2 pages. He shows up in the very last page, which is absolutely a beautifully drawn page. I thought that's really nice, right? And then we get to see him maybe like one other time. in this particular issue, as they're telling the story of this bow that destroys, or this arrow that destroys all these different types of planets and whatnot. Artwork is solid in the story. It always has been. And what happens in this book is we get to see the story of Black Dwarf, and we get to see how he self-doubts himself, as well as is he just the muscle? Why does no one really go to him for his advice, maybe except for his brother? We found out at one point that he actually was into Proxima Midnight, but obviously that's his brother's, wife. And now he's kind of into Black Swan. And so we found out those interesting concepts in the story. And obviously our Black Order has to stop this Emperor. They got to steal this arrow that destroys all these planets. And that was held by Galactus at one time, or Galactus's herald. And then, of course, at the end, when they try to go on to their mission, they run into Nova, who looks like that was on a world that was affected by that arrow and made him into some crazy warrior. And that was the issue there. So it was a cool issue just to see a little bit of Black Dwarf, of what people think of him and how he self-doubts himself and whatnot. But I wanted more Nova, and I was a little bit disappointed in that. Alright, so moving on to number 6 this week, and my number 6 book goes to SpiderGwen Ghost Spider issue 4. Alright, now this one fell, let's see, where did this one fall this week? It was, can't find it, number 8 on my most anticipated. So this book here was the aftermath of SpiderGwen, okay? I thought maybe this would kick off the story of Gwen in this universe and whatnot, but no, we deal with the aftermath, and we get to see how much pain she actually is in with the loss of all her spider characters, or her spider friends, like Spider-Man Noir and Billy Braddock and all those different types of spiders. And being that she's the one that can travel, she's the only one to travel, she's the one that has to be the bearer of bad news and tell everybody that these particular spiders actually died. And she goes to the loved ones like Aunt May for Spider-Man Noir's universe, and they got to mourn Karn. And it made for a quite emotional issue, especially when there was this one scene where Gwen actually had to tell Aunt May in Spider-Man Noir's universe, and you can see she was in denial and slaps Gwen right in the face. A very emotional moment there. And you do get to feel the pain with Gwen Stacy in this issue, and and it feels that she's got this tough burden on her hands, a great responsibility to tell everyone the bad news. So she feels like she has to stay now on her Earth for a little while and deal with her own situations. And it made for a good and solid issue, a good closeout to SpiderGwen, right? Alright, so that was a pretty good book. Was nothing wrong with it. It just doesn't really, I guess, progress Spider-Gwen's story, but it's just a good closeout. Alright, so moving on now to my top 5. And my number 5 book this week goes to Young Justice, issue 1. Now, Young Justice fell right around the same part I expected it to be. It was number 4 on my most anticipated list. And Young Justice is obviously written by Brian Michael Bendis and Patrick Gleason. Artwork is really solid in this book. I did a full in-depth review if you guys want to check it out, if you ever have the chance. And yeah, so really cool book. You get to see the formation of this team because they have a threat that's in Metropolis, and it's the Gem World Warriors coming to try to destroy the champion, which was Superman. And for whatever reason, everyone was in the area, like Jenny Hex and Tim Drake. And we get to see Impulse, which is currently Kid Flash, and Wonder Girl. And yeah, it made for an interesting story for these guys to come together. And they started doing battle against all these Gem World people. and the artwork and the facial expressions are really nice in this book. Not much that really goes on. Sorry about the blurriness there. Not much that really goes on in the issue besides a big battle, but there's something going on with Wonder Girl. Okay, we're not sure what's going on with her. She doesn't really want to fight unless she has to, and so by the time we get to the end of the next issue, we are going to see her secrets are going to be revealed. So what's happened to Wonder Girl, what she's been through and whatnot. A new character that we get to see for the first time in this book as well is Teen Lantern, so maybe we'll get to learn about her. And so that's what I hope that Brian Michael Bendis does, is flesh out these characters a little bit more so we get to know them as people and what they've been through and their struggles and things like that. I just hope that the story is not too much of a stall and we get some action and we get something that people really want out of this story. Because Brian Michael Bendis writes so many books, where does he give, you know, where does a book lack, I guess, you know? Is it going to lack here? Is it going to lack in Superman? Where's it going to lack? Because how can one man write all these stories and have them be as good as he wants them to be? All right, so that was number 5. So moving on to my number 4 pick of the week, and that goes to Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, issue 1, written by Tom Taylor. Now, this one on my list was my number 1 most anticipated. Now, it didn't make that number 1 spot here because I thought this story, I guess maybe the main enemy or whatever could be a little bit stronger. I don't know. But there just felt something a little bit lacking in this book, but still it was really good. If you're familiar with Tom Taylor, I've said this before, he's written All New Wolverine. That's some of his most recent work, or X-Men Red. But he has the same artist here that did All New Wolverine. So that creative team is doing this particular book. Love the intro page here. Get to see all the characters on the side of the buildings, like that classic Mary Jane picture. So that was really nice as well. And this book promised for Peter Parker to do more work in his neighborhood. So that's where you get to see in this. You get to see him help people fallen from a car. He saves a family from that. He winds up helping people deliver, he delivers groceries for his neighbors. And he winds up getting sent to help a young lady that's trapped in the building. Not trapped, but she's in her house and she never leaves her house. And, and he tries to get information from her and whatnot. There's some good humor in here. I think Tom Taylor gets the Peter Parker character. And I liked it. And then all of a sudden this woman gets in trouble. And they take her away, and she was obviously hiding something, because what happens at the end of this issue, she puts like these strange, weird, like, I don't know, alien-like kids in the laundry, and Peter was supposed to protect them, and I thought that was so weird. And these kids looked like kids from like the movie Children of the Corn. They got all blonde hair and they got these glowing eyes and stuff like that. Just weird, and I was like, okay, this is weird. So this is why I was like, okay, this is all right. And then you got Fred in there, Boomerang, who's wearing Peter's underwear. That was kind of weird too, So I was like, okay. But then what made this book really good is that we get this backup story here. And something's going on with Aunt May. You get to see a really good moment here with Peter and MJ as they go web swinging together. She puts on the costume to keep her identity. And they have sandwiches on the Empire State Building, which is really nice. And but Aunt May goes missing, or she doesn't go missing, but she goes to a doctor. And we find out that Aunt May has a lump and she could have cancer. So where does this story go? Does it tie into the main story eventually? My good friend over on Comic Frontline, where I do my group channel on, he did a topic video of maybe this ties into the whole Mephisto thing, where if Mary Jane and Peter get back together again, the sickness that Aunt May had comes back, and if they get married, will she die? So it makes for a very interesting theory. So very curious to see if this gets intertwined into the whole main story here. So you gotta kind of feel for Aunt May. And does Aunt May eventually kick the bucket? I don't know. We'll see what happens. But good book, really solid book. Just the beginning for this. I think Tom Taylor has some good plans in mind for Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. All right. So now, we're moving into my top 3. And my number 3 book of the week goes to Captain Marvel, issue 1. This was actually number 7 on my list, but this exceeded my expectations. Kelly Thompson did a great job at getting Captain Marvel back onto Earth, right? In the last series, we got to see, obviously, where her mom came from. Her brother went through an injury, and now she's back on Earth. She's ready to join Earth's Mightiest once again, and she's ready to start saving the world and things like that. And the book's introduction was like flawless, right? I thought maybe this was a little longer than it should have, and it was a little bit more wordy than it should have, and that's why it fell a little bit lower. But nevertheless, the introduction to this book was really good, as you get to see Captain Marvel as she's doing battle against some Kraken with Jessica Drew, which I thought was really good because those two are really good friends. And if you read the Spider-Woman series, Captain Marvel was in that series a lot. So hopefully Jessica will be in this book just as much. And that makes for an interesting supporting cast with Carol, okay? And so as they're battling this Kraken creature, we get to see Tony makes his appearance, and he's like, oh, I want a meeting with you. And between this meeting, excuse me, with Tony and Carol, it made for a very comedic conversation. It was a very lengthy conversation about Carol joining the Avengers again and doing an interview and things like that. But the wittiness of Tony Stark in this book made it not a boring conversation. So Kelly Thompson did a nice job with that, okay? And then you get to see that reestablishment there. Then you get to see a character that we have not seen in a while, and that is actually Hazmat. And Hazmat is basically Carol Danvers is going to take her under her wing and try to work through some issues because she's having some power issues. She can't control her powers, and she has to put on the suit again. She reunites with Rhodey in this issue, and it looks like they're going to rekindle their relationship. I think that's where Kelly Thompson's going to go with this. And then we also get the villain at the end of the book as well when it comes to Nuclear Man, as he does a battle against Carol as well. And then Carol gets shipped off into some weird different dimension, which I have no idea where they're going with this. But now she's revolutionary. And she's like a road warrior. I don't know. And she has other people with her as well. She's in a different Earth or something. I don't know. But it makes for an interesting book. And I think Kelly Thompson can do good with Carol Danvers. I thought it was a lot of fun. And if she keeps that light humor in this particular book and has team-ups with Jessica Drew in there as well, and it keeps it fresh, I think this could be a fun book. All right, so, but it couldn't fit higher than that in that top echelon of books because it was just a little bit too long for me. All right, so next, moving on to my number 2. And my number 2 was Murder Falcon issue 4. This made for a really solid book this week. And Murder Falcon was number 3 on my most anticipated. And I thought this was an awesome read this time because you get the revelation of Jake, right? You find out the true story of Jake on why he was pushing away his band members, his friends, and everyone else, and why the band broke up to begin with. But in between all that, you get all the heavy metal action as they're doing battle against the main antagonist. I forgot his name. And we find out that it was up to Jake's spirit to kind of delay the inevitable of this creature coming through and breaking through Earth, okay? But we find out in this story that Jake is no longer afraid. And what we find out is that when you were the reader, you thought his wife died of cancer, and he's been on his own, and he's been troubling getting through that. But that's not the case. It's the opposite role. We find out that Jake is the one that has cancer, and he's currently going through that battle. And he pushed everyone away because he was afraid of dying, and he was afraid of hurting people, and so he felt like he would just die alone. And but going through this battle with this weird creature, he had the spirit to fight and move on. And I was like, holy crap. And so what happens is that by the time we get to the end of the issue, well, you know, after they do battle against the creature, which was badass, we wind up finding out that his wife, or his ex-wife, is truly alive, and he meets up with her. And they share a hug, and hopefully he's getting the people that he cares most about back together. And this was basically the final reunion that he needs, right? He got in touch with all his friends, all his band members, and now he meets up with his wife again. So you can see that this book is much more than just heavy metal, crazy monsters, but it had to do with the spirit of fighting for your life, fighting for the things that you care for. So good, so good. And if there's a book out here that I can recommend, it's definitely Murder Falcon. Great, great read. Awesome read. All right, so if I like that one so much, what was my #1 book of the week? Well, none other goes to Criminal, issue #1, done by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. This book was great. It was #5 on my most anticipated. This book is a little hefty, right? But you paid $3.99 for it. That in itself is the value. $3.99, you got a thick book, okay? And Criminal is a crazy read, all right? Very crazy. You get to see the story about this old man, right? And the artwork's pretty good. It fits the tone of the book. You get to see the story of this old man, sorry about the glare again, who gives you this whole history of how he was this thief, how he stole this necklace, and he tells this little kid, and the little kid sits there and he goes, "Hey, Grandpa, I just wanted to take a look at this necklace." And he goes, "How'd you get this necklace?" And so he tells him the whole story of it. And the man is so shot in his mind, he didn't even realize that it's not his grandkid. It was some kid trying to steal the necklace to get money to get his dad bailed out from jail, which was hysterical, okay? And so the kid gets that. He bails his dad out from jail. And then we wind up learning about our main character in this book. His name is Teague Lawless, okay? And he's this crook, long-time crook that did these jobs and whatnot. And his kid is the one that got his dad out of jail. And so what happens in this book now is, since the kid beat up the old man to get the necklace, Teague Lawless has to get $25,000 to this guy for beating up that old legend of a crook, which I thought was hysterical. And he's like, "Oh, how am I going to get this money?" and all this kinds of other stuff. And we wind up finding out that this guy is trying to call contacts and try to see if he can get jobs to get money and all that stuff. And he found out that his best friend is the one that passed away. He died of a heart attack or whatnot. And so we get the info on his best friend. And so when he goes to his best friend's funeral and he goes to the party afterwards to remember his best friend, he finds out that his best friend was cheating him out of money. And he was so super pissed off and whatnot. And then, but as much as his best friend stole money from him, he still misses his buddy, okay? And so in the issue, he's like, well, why was he in front of that warehouse to begin with, okay? And so he goes in front of that warehouse and he goes, oh, he was doing a job. he's trying to get these, you know, money from these immigrant workers and stuff like that. And so at the end of the day, he's like, I got it all planned out to get my $25,000 and to, you know, get my debt paid off. And it made for a very interesting issue. It's a hefty issue. You have to take your time. You have to read it. But to learn about Teague Lawless and his history and how he got out of jail and his son and all those other things, it was made for a great story. And he's going to do anything he can to get this $25,000 so he can be free of this guy because his son beat up the old man for this necklace. So it's a cool book. It definitely exceeded my expectations. Love the mind of Ed Brubaker on these types of stories. So I can't wait to see where he goes. Because at the end, he leaves it off as, you know, he's going to fall in love. He's going to score big money. But by next summer, he's going to be dead. But he just doesn't know it yet. And that's just how it ended. So that was my #1 book of the week. So there you guys have it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Now, guys, in the comments below, I want to hear what your top books of the week were and what was your least favorite books of the week. And fans, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit that notification button. Guys, this channel does not work without you, so I appreciate all your guys' interactions, your support, and everything else throughout the years. And guys, until that next comic book review, this is Mike Spider Slayer signing off, and I'll see you guys real soon. Take care. Bye.